role to administer that parish, in effect as parish priest. The word leader indicates that I had a group with me, that we were to work ideally as a team rather than me as a leader, as a boss giving orders, that we would try to source each one's talents and abilities as best we could.
Yes. Now, Father, because the bishop, of course, has responsibilities throughout the diocese, is it because of that that, in effect, the leader is the parish priest of that parish, the cathedral parish?
In effect, yes.
Now, we also see that you served as Vicar General from May 1971 until May 1976. Is that correct? Sorry, April 1976. So, I'll just correct my error in the dates. It's May 1971 to April 1976. Is that right?
Yes, that is right.
Now, as I understand it, the Vicar General also serves by virtue of that position as a consultor to the bishop. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
So that is to say, as a member of the College of Consultors.
Yes.
And I take it that the Vicar General is appointed by the bishop.
Yes.
So you were appointed by Bishop Malkerns, is that right?
I was, yes.
And would you explain, Father Madden, what your role was as Vicar General?
In effect, I didn't know what my role was, and I interpreted just to do what the bishop asked me to do. But in effect, I was the diocesan finance officer in that time, just by accident. Even though the title of Vicar General, my role really was to be the diocesan accountant at that time.
And was the more traditional role of the Vicar General then fulfilled by someone else?
No. Insofar as it was fulfilled at all, I was doing it.
Now, the Bishop's Secretary at that time, am I right, was Father McInerney?
He was.
And did he not fulfill some aspects of the role of what might traditionally be regarded as the Vicar General's role?
I hadn't thought of that at the time, but it could be a possibility.
Now, was it part of your role at all as Vicar General to receive complaints from parishioners or others about issues that they might be having in their parishes with their parish priests or assistant priests?
In effect, I did not receive any complaints from any parishioner in my time with the bishop.
Now, I see from your CV that you were a diocesan consultor again from 1979 to 1982. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Now, just addressing the question of the role of the diocesan consultors, drawing on your experience, what was the role of the diocesan consultors in your time?
Theoretically, the role of the consultors is to advise the bishop on any matters that he brings before them.
Father, our understanding at the moment is that there were two important functions in that advice. One was as to the movement and appointment of priests, and the other was in relation to property matters within the diocese. Is your recollection the same as the information we have?
My recollection would be that the advice that the consultants were able to give the bishop in regard to appointments is fairly limited, because generally he presented them with a list of the appointments, and they were generally accepted as far as I can remember. But it's difficult. The property was a different matter. That generally went to the Ballarat Diocesan Property Trust, which was a different group of people.
Well, Mr. Stewart's no doubt going to take you to the minutes. We'll have a look at how that works out in the minutes.
Just on the question of the placements, Father, or indeed on any advice that the bishop did actually seek, I take it that each of the consultors would have the opportunity to express their views in order to advise the bishop. Would that be right?
When it came to appointments, there wasn't a great deal of discussion, as I remember, and it's difficult to remember individual meetings. But generally, Bishop Mulcairns' procedure was to bring in a list of the appointments that he thought appropriate, and again, without remembering details of any particular meeting, the general thrust would have been that those would have been accepted as the bishop's wish, and they went through without a great deal of discussion.
Yes, I appreciate that, Father. I'm asking a slightly different question, and that is this, is that as a consultor, were you given the opportunity to participate in a discussion or say something or to express a view if that's what you wanted to do?
The opportunity would have been there to do that if one was so moved.
Now, initially when you were appointed the Vicar General, you had been appointed to that position having been an assistant priest prior to that, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
So am I to understand that you were a relatively junior member of the College of Consultors during that time?
In relation to seniority in the diocese, I was very much the junior.
Yes. And did you know, or did you have a sense of whether the bishop had perhaps consulted on his list of suggested placements with more senior members prior to presenting the list in the meeting?
I didn't quite get that. Could you repeat it?
You spoke of a general practice where, in your recollection, the bishop would present, if I might put it like this, his preferred list or suggested list of appointments at a meeting of the consultors. My question is, did you know, or did you have the sense that he had consulted with more senior members of the College of Consultors prior to putting that list to the meeting?
I didn't. I'd be surprised if that was so. I had no inkling of that whatsoever.
Was there, to your knowledge, any form of subcommittee of the consultors that perhaps considered placements in more detail and in advance of the meetings of the College of Consultors itself?
I'm sorry, what was that word you used?
subcommittee.
I don't quite get that.
What I'm asking is whether, to your knowledge, there was a smaller group of members of the College of Consultors, but not of all the members, who considered the question of placements prior to them being considered by the whole meeting of the College of Consultors.
I understand now what you were saying. No, I'd say that what my impression was that would not happen.
Now, in the opportunity that you say you and others were given to express your views, if you chose to, I take it from time to time there was some discussion on the question of placements.
In later times, when there were changes after the Vatican Council, there would have been some discussion about the suitability of a priest relating to a particular parish or to a particular parish priest in matters of their vision or image of what the church was about. But there was never any discussion, as I remember, about their personal qualities.
Now, the members of the College of Consultors are all appointed by the bishop, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And I suppose your expectation when you served as a member of the college was that the bishop would value the advice that was given to him by the college.
I would think so. You must remember the bishop came in from outside and he was considerably younger than a lot of members of the consultors, and I presume would have valued any advice that they would have given.
And I understand from some of the minutes, and I'll take you to some of them in due course, that one of the things that the bishop stressed amongst the College of Consultors was confidentiality. Is that right?
He was very strong on that.
And was it your understanding that one of the reasons why he was strong on that was so that the discussions and the advice could be frank?
I would suppose that would be his thinking.
Was it your experience that in order for the bishop to have valuable advice given to him, that there was a free exchange of information in the College of Consultors?
That would be a normal expectation.
Now, dealing with the question of the minutes, Father, and I'll take you to individual minutes of different meetings in a moment, is it your understanding that the minutes of each meeting were recorded by the secretary?
The bishop's secretary generally took the minutes.
Yes, that's whom I'm referring to. And then at the next meeting, they would be read out to the members present in order to be confirmed or corrected as necessary.
That was the usual procedure.
And so there was no distribution of hard copies of the minutes. There was one copy which was in the minute book, which was then read out. Is that right?
My memory is that the minutes were kept in a bound book and there were no copies distributed to the various consultants.
Yes. Now, Father, I'd like to refer you to a document which will be shown to you. It's in the Ridsdale bundle, tab 86. So that should be in volume 2 of the Ridsdale bundle.
Could you repeat that, those numbers again?
It's tab 86 of volume 2 of the Ridsdale bundle. Mr. Hudson, who's there assisting you, should be able to find it for you.
He's doing his best. I have it.
That's a different one. Now, do you recognize this document as being the notes of an interview conducted with you in April 1993?
I don't remember the interview.
This was an interview.
And I take it as from the heading, it was by the insurance company. And I didn't know it was being recorded, that's for sure.
Well, let me show you the document at tab 87A, capital A. You'll see that this is a letter from a Mr. J.E. O'Connor, who's a chartered loss adjuster, to the Catholic Church Insurance Limited. And he says that he encloses a copy of the transcript of an interview with Father Eugene McKinnon at Edenhope and notes of an interview with Father Frank Madden at Horsham. And he says that he's forwarded these to, I take to be a solicitor, Mr. P. Gamble of Mrs. Donald Madden and Butler. So does that help you to remember that it was apparently a Mr. O'Connor, a chartered loss adjuster acting for Catholic Church Insurances Limited, who interviewed you in Horsham in April of 1993?
I have no memory of meeting Mr. O'Connor. I don't know, did he come to Horsham? Or is this a telephone interview?
Well, it does say in that letter that it's notes of an interview with Father Frank Madden at Horsham. I'm not able to give more information than that. That doesn't help you, Father.
I don't remember Mr. O'Connor coming to Horsham for an interview, but I have a copy of what he's alleged was part of the interview. So taken place.
I take it, Father Madden, that this is a question of memory of an event that took place many years ago. In other words, you're saying you don't remember it rather than saying that it didn't happen.
I'm saying I don't remember it.
Yes. And accepting, if you would for a moment, that this Mr. O'Connor, a loss adjuster, did interview you on behalf of Catholic Church Insurances Limited, would it be fair to say that you would have answered his questions honestly and openly?
I would have endeavoured to do that at any time.
And you've had the opportunity, have you, to see this document in more recent times, by which I mean certainly within the last several months, have you?
Yeah, the document was sent to me by the Commission.
Yes. And so do you accept Father, that what Mr. O'Connor has recorded here is what you told him?
Well, I don't know. I don't remember the interview, but it has a certain authenticity about it that I would accept as something I would have said.
Is there any part of it, to your knowledge, that you would challenge as not reflecting what you told or would have told Mr. O'Connor?
I'm really not in a position to do that because I don't remember the interview. I'm not in a position to challenge.
Well, perhaps
I have no memory of the interview.
yes. Well, perhaps we may come back to parts of that in due course. Now, I want to address some questions to you, Father, that relate to Monsignor John Day. I take it you know who I'm referring to?
I do.
And do you know who I'm referring to when I mention Father Dan Torpy?
I remember Father Dan Torpy. Yes.
Now, is it the case that in 1971 or 72, which is to say early in the period when you were Vicar General, that Father Torpy told you as Vicar General that he had been informed by a parishioner that the parishioner's child had been in a situation of sexual activity with Monsignor Day?
I don't remember talking to Dan Torpy about that.
Well, what I'm asking you really is, did Dan Torpy raise this with you? That is to say, report to you the report that he had received from the parishioner with regard to the parishioner's child and Monsignor Day?
Was this before or after the policeman had come to the bishop about Monsignor Day?
That I don't know, but it was before. What I understand is that it was before Monsignor Day resigned. So we're dealing with a period of time late 71, early 72.
Why I ask that is that the bishop had informed me immediately of what the allegations against Monsignor Day were the day the policeman came to see him.
And are you saying you just
I don't remember Dan Torpy talking to me before.
I'm sorry, Father, you say you don't remember Dan Torpy talking to you about complaints against Monsignor Day before you were told by the bishop what the policeman had reported to him?
I don't remember that, and I'm surprised because I had no knowledge of Monsignor Day's operations until the bishop told me what the allegations were against him brought by the policeman on the day they visited him. And if Dan Torpy told me that after that, it would have been inconsequential.
Yes. Now, you referred to, you said you didn't know what Dan Torpy's operations were at that time. What were his operations?
Dan, as I understand it from memory, was assistant priest at Jura.
Well, that was his position, You referred to, as I understand it, his operations. I stand to be corrected. You referred to Monsignor Day's operations. So I withdraw that. So you're saying, as I understand it, in relation to what Dan Torpy may have told you, that you don't remember it, but it might have happened.
It may have happened after the bishop had informed me.
Right. So if it had occurred before the bishop,
it did happen before that.
Okay, I'm sorry. If it happened before the bishop had informed you, then you think you would remember it. So on that basis,
well, I wouldn't have been surprised when the bishop told me.
Yes, I see that. So prior to the bishop telling you, you had not had knowledge of there being problems with Monsignor Day in relation to sexual activity with children?
Not the faintest idea.
If I can refer you to a document in the Monsignor John Day tender bundle at tab 17. Do you have that, Father? It's a rather poor reproduction of a letter dated in Mildura, 8th December 1971.
I do.
And it's from Detective Constable Ryan and the headmaster of St. Joseph's College, Mildura, and it's addressed to the bishop, and it sets out the details of some interviews that the detective constable had conducted with a number of people and the allegations they made about Monsignor Day. Do you see that?
I have the letter, yes.
Yes. Now, did the bishop show you that letter or report to you that he had received that letter from the detective and from the principal of the school?
No, he did not. This is the first time I've seen this letter.
And I take it then that he did not discuss with you or show you his response or his reply to that letter?
No, I didn't know anything of this at all.
So he told you what the police, the two policemen had told him, but not what this headmaster or principal and policeman had told him.
That is correct.
All right, I'll move on then and deal with the complaint from the police.
Sorry, just before you move on, Father, it's Commissioner Murray here. I just want to check with you, were you aware at all whether the bishop kept a separate or secret set of files about his priests?
I do not know that. I know that he was very particular about his confidentiality on his priests. But whether there were secret files, I do not know.
So a letter like this, which you didn't see, did he have his own filing area, which was kept locked and confidential?
I do not know that. My role was just doing the sums and keeping the accounts. I had no involvement in this sort of thing.
Thank you.
The way you give us to understand your role as Vicar General seems to be a little different to what we've understood how other Vicar-Generals have operated. Is that right?
Well, certainly different from what Vicar-Generals have done in Ballarat of late. I had no idea what the role of Vicar-General was. I was only in the diocese working for 6 or 7 years. I was still learning to be priest at that time. And what a Vicar-General was supposed to do, I had no idea.
And you never found out?
It was enough to be just doing the accounts. That kept me busy. I was running a little parish as well.
But you never seem to have filled the role that other Vicar-Generals have told us they've filled in being the representative of the priests to the bishop. You never had that role?
The truth of the matter is I was a failure at Vicar-General because I was no good at the upfront stuff. Like chairing meetings and introducing visitors. Just wasn't my role. So I didn't fulfil what would be normally expected of a Vicar-General. I was quite happy to do the sums, and that was enough to keep me going.
And do you have an understanding, Father, as to why you were appointed as Vicar-General when you were as junior as you were in 1971?
It's just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. You would have to go back a bit, if you don't mind. In Bishop O'Collins's time, the accounts, all the finances of the diocese were managed by his secretary, Monsignor McCunney. And no one else, I don't even think Bishop O'Collins had any idea of the financial accounts or position. Monsignor McCunney died very suddenly in December 1970. And I just happened to be an assistant priest at the cathedral at the time, and I had an accountancy background, so I was appointed to ask to look after the accounts at the diocese by Collins, which I did, and then I continued to do that until when Bishop Mulcairns was appointed during 1971, I think, and I just happened to be working in the office with Bishop Mulcairns, and because I was on spot, that's how I interpreted my appointment as Vicar-General, that I was already working with him in the sense of day by day association in joining offices, and it was just convenient then to, rather than bring someone else in at that time, he always had his secretary, of course, as Vicar-General.
Yes, Father. Thank you. Now I'm going to move forward to the time when the two policemen visited Bishop Mulcairns and made a report to him. And I'd like to refer you in the same day tender bundle to tab 35.
Yes, I have that letter.
And this is actually a report from a police officer, Superintendent O'Connor, to the Deputy Commissioner, as you'll see from the front page. But I'd like to take you to page 3 of that report, to the top of the page. Do you have that?
Yes.
And you'll see that the superintendent reports, he says that on the 27th of January 1972, we visited Bishop Mulcairns at Ballarat. He advised us the information in his letter of 18 December to Senior Detective Ryan and Mr. Howden to the effect the police investigating the allegations against Monsignor Day were satisfied they were without substance, and was given him by Mr. Joseph Carney, Clerk of the Magistrates Court Mildura, who accompanied the Monsignor to Ballarat to answer Ryan and Howden's allegations. So just so as you understand, the letter that's being referred to there is the letter that I showed you a few minutes ago. And then he goes on,
Yes.
and he says, I, that's the police superintendent, acquainted the bishop as to the further allegations unknown to him, and in consequence, the Monsignor attended at Ballarat the following day, and on Sunday the 30th of January, Monsignor Day publicly announced at Masses at Mildura he had submitted his resignation to the bishop, and it was effective as from 1st February 1972. He was to leave Mildura immediately and intended to travel overseas for some months. He made no reference to the allegations. Now, that's what the superintendent reported. But I take it that the meeting you referred to, that is to say, where two policemen visited the bishop and told the bishop about allegations against Day, and that the bishop then reported to you, it's this meeting, is it?
I'm sorry, is there a question there?
Yes. What I'm seeking to establish is whether what you referred to, which was that after two policemen had visited the bishop and reported to him allegations against Day, the bishop then told you about that, whether that is this same meeting we're reading about here, to your knowledge or understanding.
I don't know that. I just remember that the policeman came and had an interview with the bishop in his office. They happened to walk through my office as they went into the bishop, so I didn't know they were policemen at that stage, and when they had gone, the bishop told me the burden of their message, and that's whether it's related to this or not, I do not know.
And that came, as you said, as a surprise or a shock to you, is that right?
Well, absolutely. Monsignor Day was a big personality, and it was a big shock.
And he had been parish priest at Mildura for a considerable period of time, hadn't he?
Well, as I understand it, I hardly knew John Day. I was in Warrnambool and then Ballarat, and he was in Mildura, and probably passed pleasantries with him at meetings, but that's about all I had to do with Monsignor Day. So I don't know his moves before that or where he was.
Yes. Now, do you recall, or doing the best you can, Father, can you recount what it is that the bishop told you after the two policemen had been to see him?
Don't recall the details, of course, but I do recall that there were serious allegations of sexual offences against children.
Yes. And to your recollection, was it very shortly thereafter that Monsignor Day resigned his position as parish priest at Mildura?
I see that now. I didn't know what happened at Mildura. I just knew that he left Mildura, that was all.
Yes. Well, perhaps if we can look at the next tab, tab 36. Do you have that, Father?
I do.
And you'll see about 6 weeks later, on the 14th of March, the Diocesan Council held a meeting at the bishop's residence, and amongst others present were yourself. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then you'll see immediately below that, it says that His Lordship outlined the circumstances which have led to the resignation of Monsignor Day from the parish of Mildura. The council decided that Monsignor Day be granted 12 months leave of absence from the diocese on the guaranteed minimum per day. Now, I take it, Father, that where it refers to His Lordship outlined the circumstances which have led to the resignation of Monsignor Day, he outlined the circumstances of these very serious complaints against Monsignor Day. Would that be right?
Well, I really don't know. I have no memory of this particular meeting at the Bishop's residence.
Well, perhaps then, leaving aside what you actually remember, let's deal with your experience of the meetings more generally, the situation that we have there where there have been very serious allegations made against a senior priest who you described as a big figure in the diocese, and the bishop is reporting to his consultors and presumably seeking their advice. Is it to be expected that where it's recorded that he outlined the circumstances, that he would have told the truth as to those circumstances? In other words, that there were serious allegations of child sexual abuse against Monsignor Day?
So I said I have no recollection of it. Just impossible to remember individual meetings after all this time. I have no memory of this meeting whatsoever, so I can't really comment on what the bishop may or may not have said about this. But it wouldn't have been a surprise to me because he'd already told me about Monsignor Day.
Well, it would be a surprise to you, wouldn't it, Father, if the bishop had not told his consultors the essence or substance of those circumstances?
Wouldn't have been a great surprise if he didn't give great details because, as I say, he was very particular about his own priests and any sense of misbehaviour that might have occurred.
Well, he was also particular that there should be a cone of confidentiality over the meetings of the College of Consultors, and on that basis he could tell them the truth in outlining the circumstances. Would that not be right?
Well, it depends on the individual. I don't know what the bishop did or not, and what I expected is not relevant.
Father, Father, you remember earlier in your evidence I talked to you about the two roles of the consultants, one being to advise in relation to the movement and appointment of priests and the other to deal with property matters. Do you remember that?
I do.
When you look at this minute, you can see both those roles reflected in the minutes, can't you? Because the first matter, as Mr. Stewart's pointed out to you, concerns the circumstances leading to the resignation of Monsignor Day. You see that?
Yes.
And then
I do, Your Honour.
The minutes record the councillors deciding that he be granted leave. You see that?
I do, Your Honour.
Now, that's immediately followed by a discussion about land, an acquisition of land and so on. You see that?
I hadn't seen it before.
Well, you see it now, can't you? See that? So there's the two roles captured, one paragraph after another, isn't it? One, the movement and appointment of priests, and the other, property matters.
Yes.
Is that right?
That would appear to be the way it's reported. Yes.
And as you, I think, have indicated, as you understood it, although you perhaps were a junior person, although not so junior by this time, the role of the consultants was to give advice in relation to those matters to the bishop.
I'm not quite sure what the canon law says about the role of consultors at all, but I understand that if property is to be disposed of above a certain value, it has to be with the consent of the bishop.
And the consultants are called upon to give advice to help the bishop make up his mind, aren't they?
Well, it's generally the decision of the local parish when it comes to that sort of thing, and it has to go through the procedure with the bishop, but the decisions are usually made on the local level because the Trust Corporation holds the property in trust for the particular parish.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. The minutes can talk later on.
Father, at this point, in other words, following Monsignor Day's resignation and this decision recorded here to grant him 12 months leave of absence, did you then know at that time that he went overseas?
Well, I didn't know where he was, and what happened in Mildura and where Monsignor Day was for that year, I do not know.
Well, you knew, of course, that another parish priest was appointed formal juror. That's Monsignor Mackenzie, is that right? That appears in the minute towards the foot of the page.
Is it? Yes. I'm just a bit surprised to see that that's there. I knew Monsignor Mackenzie was appointed. He was administrator at the cathedral at the time, and he was my immediate superior insofar as I was still on cathedral staff.
Why does it surprise you, Father, to see that that's recorded there?
I thought it was the bishop's, you might call it captain's pick, because it happened pretty quickly. And I had no recollection of it being, I still haven't, going to the consultants, but apparently it did.
Yes, well, there it is. But in any event, perhaps we can move on from that specifically. Now, you've said you have no recollection of the meeting. I'll just try on one more issue in relation to the meeting. Perhaps it can jog your memory. Was there any discussion to your recollection at the meeting, or report even, about Monsignor Day being sent for any form of treatment?
I have, as I said, I have no recollection of the meeting. So I have no recollection of what was decided about Monsignor Day in the area of treatment. No recollection whatsoever.
Now, some months later, in May 1972, the bishop, that's Bishop Malkerns, of course, was advised by the police that Monsignor Day would not be prosecuted in relation to those allegations against him of indecent assault. Did the bishop inform you of that?
No. I have no recollection of that anyway. Whether he did or not, I have certainly no recollection of it.
Yes. Now,
there's no reason why he would have.
Well, having informed you that there were these serious allegations against Day back in January of 1972, I suppose there might be some reason why he would tell you in May 1972 that he'd been advised by the police that the allegations were not going to be prosecuted.
I have no recollection of him telling me that.
Yes.
I didn't know what happened to Monsignor Day.
If I can take you to tab 53.
Yes.
Now, this is now a meeting on 15 June 1972, and do you see that it's recorded that you were present?
Yes.
And I think it's item number 3 of the minutes says, the bishop suggested that he would write to Bishop Thomas of Geraldton to ask him to invite Monsignor Day to accept work within Geraldton. Now, I take it that that's a reference to Geraldton in Western Australia. To your recollection, was Bishop Thomas the bishop of the relevant diocese covering Geraldton?
No, this is news to me. Whether I was asleep or what, but I have no recollection of that whatsoever. Go to Geraldton. Can't imagine John Day in Geraldton.
Well, you seem...
No, I'm sorry, I have no recollection of that.
Well, you seem surprised to read that there, and is it because it's an extraordinary idea to send a senior priest from the Diocese of Ballarat to another diocese on the other side of the country?
Not normally done.
So you have no recollection as to why this suggestion was made by the bishop to seek work for Monsignor Day in Geraldton?
No, because honestly, I just can't remember this meeting. I'm getting old and whatever, but I have no recollection. That's all.
Well, looking at the
Surprise to me.
Looking at the minutes, it suggests, does it not, Father, that the bishop wanted to get Monsignor Day away and out of his own diocese, even though the police had indicated that there would be no prosecution of the allegations against Monsignor Day?
I don't know that. I don't know what the bishop thought about that at all, and I'm not in a position to make any kind of judgment.
Father, you see the item before item 3, item 2. It reads, the question of the number of priests on extended overseas leave was raised by the bishop. After discussion, it was decided that there should be no more than 4 on extended leave each year, and that due notice of application should be made to the bishop. Do you see that?
I do, yes, Your Honour.
Now, that reads like the issue of the number of priests overseas was laid on the table for discussion, doesn't it?
That would be one way of interpreting that minute, yes.
Well, do you think that's the right way to interpret it?
Well, yes.
Yeah. Do you have any recollection of that issue being discussed?
I don't actually. It was more a matter for the priest senate at that time, I would have thought. That this whole idea of continuing education and availing ourselves of the opportunity to study for 6 months in America or in Europe was raised by the Senate of Priests, and I know the priests appreciated it, and I don't remember this particular discussion because I don't remember the meeting. But I know that priests were enthusiastic about it, and a few years later I was available of it myself.
Now, do you recall that some months later, in August, a couple of months later, there was a newspaper article that outlined the various allegations against Day, but without actually naming him as the priest concerned? Do you recall that?
Newspaper?
Yes.
I don't. What newspaper was it?
Well, I'll show it to you. That'll be the easiest. It's at tab 61. Do you have that there, Father?
No, not yet. Would you just repeat the index numbers again?
It is 61.
61.
Still of the Day bundle. Do you have it now, Father?
I do.
Right, you'll see on the right-hand side, halfway down, it's recorded in manuscript that it's from the Melbourne Observer, 13 August 1972, and there's an initial over the stamp of the Chief Commissioner. Do you see that?
Melbourne Observer, and the date, and then there's a signature from the police. Yes.
Yes. Now, without taking the time to read this whole article, but if you look in the first column, towards the foot of the column, about 3 paragraphs from the bottom, it says the detective said he was introduced to the priest soon after his arrival in Mildura, and then it recounts an incident of finding the priest with two known prostitutes, as it said, and if I might say in compromising circumstances. And in the next column, it goes on to outline allegations of, as it's put there, indecent assault against children. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Now, perhaps putting that to one side for a moment, you can refer back to it if you need to. Now, do you, sitting here today, now have recollection of that article about a parish priest or the parish priest in Mildura being published?
I don't know the Melbourne Observer. I've never seen this. In later time, I did hear that about this article, but I haven't seen it before.
Well,
But sometime later, I didn't know where. I presumed it was printed in the Mildura paper. I've never heard of the Melbourne Observer, I must confess.
well, when you say sometime later, do you mean in some relatively short space of time after the article was published, you heard about it or would have heard about it?
Well, I couldn't tell you how long afterwards because I don't know when I first heard of this publication. How long after it actually happened, I do not know. But it was sort of spoken about that this had been published, and I don't know how later it was than this 13th of August 72.
And when you say it was spoken about, do you mean it was spoken about amongst priests in the diocese, or at least in Ballarat where you were based?
Well, it was spoken about by a number of people, obviously, who had seen this article in the Melbourne Observer. Whether it was just priests or other people, I really don't know.
Well, it was a matter of some controversy and scandal, wasn't it?
I was never close to the Mildura scene at all. I don't know what happened up there in detail, but you got the general drift of things as time went on.
Well, Father, you've told us that the bishop reported to you in January of 1972 about the allegations that were made against Day, and then you knew that he had resigned. You were at the meeting where the circumstances of his resignation were outlined. You were at the meeting where there was a discussion about him possibly going to Geraldton, and we now have this publication, therefore in the public space, and you've said that people spoke about it. It would have been a matter of some interest and concern to you, would it not, in your position as a consultor and the Vicar General, that a priest of the diocese had these allegations made against him in such a public way?
It was a concern to everybody.
Yes, it must have been discussed in the bishop's office, not so?
Not with me, anyway.
Well, you said people were talking about it. I take it you know they were talking about it because that was in your presence.
Well, people were talking, asking me if I'd seen the article or referring to it or whatever.
And you would accept that the fact of this article and generally the nature of the scandal was known, or would have been known, to the consultors at that time?
I don't know what the other consultants knew at any time. I only know what I knew.
Father, a story like this on the front page of a newspaper, any paper, I assume was of great concern to the priests that you knew, was it not?
The whole episode was of concern
Yeah.
to all the clergy.
I mean, it was striking at the heart of the mission that the priests have in the community to find one of their number was alleged to have abused children, wasn't it?
It was a great disappointment and embarrassment to the rest of us.
Yeah. And I assume that for that reason, you and your colleagues would talk to each other about it.
John Day's name was talked around in the circumstances of this whole episode. It was in the public arena.
Yeah. And as we presently understand it, and I think you've suggested this in your earlier evidence, Monsignor Day was a man who was talked about in the diocese for the good things he was seen to have done. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. John, he was a flamboyant, as far as I didn't know the man very well, but his reputation was one of a flamboyant character and was very much in the public eye. That's in the civil situation as well as the church.
So when you say yes and no, is the yes the fact that he was well known in the civil society, but that was seen to be, by some people, not such a good idea? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that.
What are you saying?
At all. To be well known in the civil, in your wider society and well thought of and contribute is a plus. But there was always, I suppose, the fear that Monsignor Day might overdo it, that there might have been an element of self-aggrandisement in it all.
Right. Now, the fact that he was well known, I assume, increased the level of shock amongst the clergy that these allegations came forward.
I didn't quite get that, Your Honour.
The fact that he was well known, had a reputation in civil society, I assume, added to the shock when these allegations became public.
I think that is true.
Yeah. And that was a shock that was visited not only upon the reputation of the church in Mildura, but it was a shock throughout the diocese, I assume.
I would think so, yes.
Yeah.
Not that I can speak for everybody.
No, but that would be your sense of it. Would that be right? That everyone felt the shock?
Would be right.
Yeah.
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 If I can take you to tab 64, Father. You'll see that this is a minute of a further meeting of the consultors, this time on 19 September 1972. Yes, 1972. So,
I have this minutes, yes.
yes, just over a month after the article was published. You'll see that it's recorded that you were present. Do you see that?
I do.
And then in item 2, it says, re Monsignor J. Day, His Lordship discussed with the Council the possibility that Monsignor Day may take legal action against the Melbourne Observer. The opinion of Council was that if Monsignor Day, after full consideration of all possibilities with the Bishop, was determined to do so, no obstacle should be posed. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you have any recollection of that discussion?
No, I don't.
Yes.
I don't.
But you'll accept,
Extraordinary.
of course, Father, that given that report that was made to the consultors, by that date at least, all the consultors knew what allegations had been made against Monsignor Day in the public arena.
Well, I think at this stage it was in the public arena and the consultants would have been aware of it, yes.
Yes. So if I can take you to tab 65.
Yes.
And you'll see this is a minute of the meeting of the consultants on 12 January 1973, so some months later, and you'll see that you were recorded as present. Do you see that?
I do.
And you'll see the third item. Well, I should start with the top. You see it says that a preliminary meeting held on Monday, and there's a date there, perhaps 8th January, brought forward matters relating to proposed transfers. Do you see that?
I do.
Now, that suggests that there was some form of preliminary meeting of the consultants. Are you able to throw any light on that?
I don't know what that means. A preliminary meeting held on Monday.
Well,
8th January.
it seems to suggest one of two possibilities. One is that there was perhaps a smaller meeting, what I described earlier as possibly a subcommittee, possibly of senior members or those closest to the bishop, who then brought forward a list of proposed transfers, or that there was actually a meeting of the College of Consultants itself, which is described as preliminary, and this was now the formal meeting considering it further. Are you able to assist us on that?
Are there minutes of that so-called preliminary meeting? I don't recall it. I don't know.
Yes. Well,
Seems to me, mate.
there are no minutes of it to my knowledge. In any event, what was then reported, the second item under that, it says that Monsignor J. Day be appointed parish priest of Timboon. Moved Monsignor McInerney, seconded Monsignor Fiscalini. Do you see that?
I do.
So we're obviously to understand from this that Day was then appointed to that parish.
Yeah.
And he was appointed as parish priest.
Yes.
And I take it well, let me not make any assumptions. Father, do you have any recollection of any discussion on this item at that meeting?
Only for the fact that my name is there amongst those present, I would say I wasn't at this meeting. I don't remember Monsignor Day being appointed to Timboon, but apparently I was there, and obviously I didn't say anything about his history or challenge it. I have to wear that.
Father, if you look at the minute, you'll see the bottom of the page, there's a whole list of appointments. You see that?
I do.
And they, in fact, continue over the page. If you've got the other.
I do too.
So there's a lot of appointments that are recorded at that meeting. See that?
I do. I'm surprised.
But there's only one appointment that's the subject of the formality of a mover and a seconder. Do you see that?
I do.
And that's Monsignor Day. Now,
I'm intrigued by that.
well, you may have gathered, so am I. Can you help me as to why that would be the one that's picked out to be treated in that way?
I can't really. I remember this. This is all very interesting.
Well, of course, Monsignor Day by this time was a mighty controversial figure, wasn't he?
Publicly, yes, he was
And
fairly well known.
we've talked about the shock to all of your colleagues and finding out what he'd
Yes,
alleged to have done. Do you think that might be the reason why it was necessary to have this formal discussion and record how the decision was made?
I really can't help you there. I just don't know.